The concept of God's love, John chapter 13 puts it this way. Verse 31 says, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also be glorified in himself and will glorify him immediately. Okay, you got that? God is glorified in him, and when I get glorified in him, I'm glorifying me. When I glorify me, he gets glorified, and when he gets glorified, I'm more glorified. So I'm going to fix this thing so that he gets more glory when this thing is over. And then he's going to give me more glory when this thing is over, because he got more glory when this thing is over. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you're caught up in something bigger in verse 11, 1 John 4. If God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. Now watch this. If you hang out in a flower shop, you're going to start smelling like flowers. You hang out in a flower shop, that smell going to rub off on you. If you hang out in a perfume shop or area of a store with perfume and cologne, you're going to start smelling like cologne, because that's where you're hanging out. In other words, your environment affects how you look or smell. God says, watch this, I am caught up in a love fest, and I am love. If you are not loving, it's because you ain't hanging out in my shop. You in somebody else's shop. Because I am love. That's my store. My store is called love. If you are hanging out in that store, love is rubbing off on you. So if you are a loveless Christian, you shopping at the wrong store. Let me put it another way. God will determine how much he deals with you by how much you deal with others. Please notice the words here. This is serious business. He says in verse 8, the one who doesn't love doesn't know me. He says in verse 12, God, if we love one another, God abides in us and his love is perfected in us. He says in verse 16, if the one who abides in love abides in God and God abides in him. He says in verse 20, the one who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. So he says, forget about it. You cannot have an intimate experience with me if others can't have an intimate experience with you. If you do not know how to love or refuse to love, you won't feel my love. He restricts the experience of himself to believers who are functioning in love as a lifestyle. Okay, you're not getting this. God is love. That's who he is. So he only hangs out with love. So since he is love and he only hangs out with love, if that's not how you roll, he can't hang out with you. Because he would then be hanging out with something that's not like him. That who you are and who I am, even though you're my child, because he's talking to Christians. That's why it says one another. He's not talking about the world right here. He's talking about love within the family of God. That's why if the devil can make you selfish, the devil can make you hateful, the devil can make you mean and ornery and nasty and unforgiving, if he can put all of that stuff in you, he knows God's going to leave you alone because you're not hanging out where he's hanging out. He only hangs out with that which is consistent with who he is, and he's already told you who he is love. The word abide means to hang out. He says, if you're not abiding in love, you're not hanging out with me. So the more you love, the more you're in his hangout. The more you love, the more you're in the environment that he's comfortable with. And so if it's only about me, myself, and I, if it's only about being blessed and not being a blessing, That's why every time God talks about being blessed, he wants to know how you're going to be a blessing. Or is it only about you? Because if it's only about you, you're not with me. Because I don't make it only about me. I make it about my baby boy. And my baby boy makes it back about me. So if you want to hang out with us, you got to roll like we roll. And so one of the reasons that many Christians aren't experiencing God is because they are loveless saints. They don't ask the question, how can I love today? Who can I love today in the family of God? What can I do today? You can't love everybody, but you can love somebody. And that means, what does it mean to love then? To love means is the decision. It is decision. Let me state that again. Let me clarify something, because we use these words wrongly. We confuse love and like. We confuse that. So let's get this. Let me explain this, okay? Like is a feeling. I like you, I don't like him. Don't say I love chocolate cake. You like chocolate cake. That's how you feel about it. You like the taste. So you like it. That's okay, because there's some things you don't like. Biblical love, agape, is a decision regardless of an emotion. An emotion, you may love something you like, but you can also love stuff you don't like. In other words, you don't feel good about it, but you made a decision regarding it, okay? You made a decision to eat vegetables. You may not like it, but you love healthy food and nutrition. Because you love that, you choose and decide to eat what you don't like. So love is the decision to compassionately, righteously, and responsibly seek the well-being of another. God does that with his son. To love God means to passionately seek his glory. So the more glory of God you seek, the more you're loving God. And the more compassion to others you give, the more you're loving people. When God sees the compassion, he translates that to passion, so that his passion can refer to your compassion, so that his love can enter your love, so that you can get more of him. Look at this. Look what he says. He says in chapter 3 of 1 John that if you love, he says that we ought to love little children, verse 18, let us love not just in word and tongue, but in deed and truth. Then he comes and he says, and whatever, verse 22, we ask from him because we keep his commandments, which involves love, do the things that are pleasing to him. Guess what? He says the way to get your prayers answered is to start loving. You can go to church till you blue in the face. If he doesn't see love, forget your prayer meeting. You can sing songs till you blue in the face. If he doesn't see love, he says forget your prayers, okay? Because you're talking to me different than who I am. I am love. When I see you love, that gets my mojo working, because that's what I'm doing all the time, 24 hours a day. So when I see you plugged into who I am, I say, oh, he being like me. If you don't think that's what he's saying, all you got to do is read verse 17. But this love is perfected within us so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, so also are we in the world. How is he? Love. What are you doing in the world? Being loving. He says when he sees you being a loving Christian as a way of life, he says you're being just like him in this world as he is in that world. And when he sees that, you have gotten his undivided attention. The reason why more Christians aren't hearing from God, more churches aren't seeing the transformation of the Spirit, is they are often loveless places no matter how good the preaching is. You can't preach your way into this. You can't sing your way into this. You can't shout your way into this. You can't wave your hand in the air like you just don't care enough in this. This will only happen when God sees us individually and corporately. The number one thing that should be said about you and should be said about our church should not be the preaching, the preacher, the sermon, the choir, the singing, the gifts, The one thing that should override everything else is, wow, look at how they love one another. Jesus said in John 13, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples. Not by the preaching, not by the singing, but by the loving. Unless there is a love fest in this house, we will not see miracles from heaven. Unless there's a love fest in your house, you will not see miracles from heaven. You can look the part but have no life. You can look the part, you can carry the Bible, use the Christian words, but the life that is bred by love, if that is missing, it's like the prodigal son. The prodigal son. And remember, God demonstrated his love to us when we didn't deserve it. Not when. It's easy to love folk that you think deserve it. But while we were yet sinners, Christ died when we didn't deserve it. Okay, the prodigal son was wild. He had wild out, and he now coming back home to Papa. Coming back home to Daddy. He said, I have sinned. Daddy said, okay, now you've gotten right with me. Now you confessed your sins. Now you're doing right. We're going to throw a party. But then there was the older brother. The older brother went to Papa and said, what you doing? What you doing? You throwing a party for him? He didn't go out here and act a fool, and you throwing a party for him? That ain't right. You throwing a party for him, and I've been here with you all the time. What you doing, Daddy? Father looked at the older brother and said, this is your brother who was lost, who has been found, and he came home. So I gots to throw a party for him. Because I don't know about you, but I'm glad he's home. What's interesting about Luke 15 and the prodigal son is the story ends right there. You never know what the older brother does. The point being, he's got to decide now whether he's going to hang out with Daddy or not. Because Daddy is going to hang out with the brother that's come home. But see, a lot of older Christians don't want to hang out with folk who've been forgiven, who've been redeemed. Don't want to hang out with compassion for those whose lives have been broken and beaten. When you see somebody walk through this door and life has not been good to them, like they've been tore up from the flow up. You see somebody walk through this door and their clothes are raggedy, and maybe they're ashamed by their history, their background, their lifestyle, but they walk through because they want to hear a word from the living God. Don't think you better. Because you were no better when Jesus died for you. In fact, if it wasn't for Jesus, you would have been walking through the door looking like that. Because some of us have been dug out of some real low pits. Maybe it wasn't that, but it was something else. You take the stand. You never dumb down the word of God. But what you do is love people with a standard. You love people with a standard who are willing to adjust to that standard. And when you go to either one of those streams, see, when you love without truth, then that becomes emotional sentimentalism. But when you have truth without love, then you have cold orthodoxy. The idea is to speak the truth with love, so that folk know we care, but I got to tell you what God says. I'm not going to change what God says, but I'm going to love you while I tell it to you. It is the absence of love that has kept God's church separated and segregated. It's the absence of love that's made 11 o'clock on Sunday morning the most segregated hour in America. It is the absence of love that's got black Christians against white Christians against Hispanic Christians. And it was the absence of love that created the Civil War. Because if the church was the church, you wouldn't have had a civil war, because they would have stood up for the truth of God. But because people either want to love without truth or have truth without love, they do not live based on a biblical standard. And it's time for Christians to stand up for the truth and not for the culture.